Italian restaurant in Old Town, Alexandria, called called Pasta Peasant. That if it's still there, I highly recommend it.
Aha, Pasta Peasant?
Yes, I lived in Arlington for a while.
Aha, me too.
What part?
I still have a small condominium in Boston,
Oh, that's where I was. I was just up in North Fourth, just near the mall.
Stafford Street, in my case, yeah.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, the problem is there's a lot to do, but this job gets in the way of a lot. So. Aaron is smiling. I guess,
I think everybody feels that way from time
Yes,
to
it does.
time, Bob.
right. It's not like, this is, there's a lot to do in Madison too. It's not like somehow, there's nothing to do there. It's just, anyway, I'll stop whining.
I see.
Charles, I'm glad to see they finally have figured out how to not exclude you. That's good. And there's the young Bob who's
You're muted, Charles.
joined us.
Aaron, are we expecting anyone else or should we get started?
I think we're all here, aren't we? Steve?
I hope
is
so.
Coming? Joan? Are we?
I had no indication that he wasn't.
Well, it's just 7, so I'm sure he'll pop in. But you're welcome to get started if you're ready.
Great. Okay. 7 p.m. I'd like to call this June 1st, 2023 planning meeting of the Madison Planning and Zoning Commission to order. And on our agenda tonight, the first item we have is a discussion about attendance. Aaron, did you want to do that first and get it quickly out of the way?
Oh, well, I had called to order. We could do, that's a template on this new website program. So it's not a discussion. It's just.
I thought you wanted to lecture us.
Here and, no, I'm sorry. It's a form template. And
we actually
didn't delete it, but we could talk about attendance after if you'd like, and upcoming meetings and summer school.
Okay, we'll do that at the end then. Let's do that.
I apologize for that. It's just a form and I can delete that in the
A new
future.
template.
It's just a call to order and roll call, Carol.
Okay, we're good. So I think we'll jump right in with the plan of conservation and development updates.
Excellent. So John and Steve and Carol and I think kind of worked on this feedback from the last meeting and looking for a little more cohesive, grouping of our goals and action items. And I know we received it today. So don't panic if you didn't have an opportunity to read through the whole thing and take notes. We plan to just kind of walk through it tonight and see if this is more the approach that the commission is looking, or the direction, I guess, that we're looking to go in, and if it's making sense. So John, did you want to kind of lead that or you want me to?
Either way, I'll just, I'll explain a little bit how we got here. And obviously we'd had a couple of months of sort of a little bit less structured discussion, just kind of talking about the issues surrounding natural resources, the natural environment in general. And then so we started to try to organize our thinking a little bit, and I think spurred by some thoughts about getting a small number of goals down on paper. And so then what we had done is we did that last month and received some more feedback, I believe, from the Conservation Commission. And Carol was good enough to rearrange some of our goals, some of the broad goals, such as focus on understanding and sharing knowledge of the natural environment, and sort of into the 3 thematic buckets of vitality and connectivity, resilience and sustainability, and opportunity and growth. And so then taking that, we sort of more recently, and you got this today, and I apologize again for the relative late notice on it, but a lot of this information you've already seen, into a more structured format of policies that again are dropped into these thematic buckets. And then under each policy, I've provided a little bit of introductory language on kind of describing why the policy is relevant, and then breaking those into specific actions in support of each policy. And so the policies under vitality and connectivity are focused on understanding and sharing knowledge of natural environment and connecting people to the environment. Under resilience and sustainability, we have focus on preparedness and resiliency from effects of climate change, and consistently update policies and undertake tasks for sustainability. And then under the opportunity and growth buckets, we have increase active stewardship of natural resources and develop a stronger strategic approach to property acquisition. A lot of the, and I don't know if the Conservation Commission comments were forwarded around broadly, but a lot of their comments had to do with stewardship and directing funds towards stewardship, and they really wanted us to focus on the stronger strategic approach to property acquisition. They added a number of things in there. So this represents, a compilation of a number of their comments. So I'll stop there and take, Carol and Aaron's lead on how you would like to, to discuss.
Thanks, John. Did everyone have a chance to look at this, or
I did.
Some of
I
us
did.
are-
I read through it. I like this format much better.
Great, because what I tried to do since the last meeting was to take what we had and make it fit into our pairings there. So I thought it worked really well.
I agree. Yeah.
Other people may have other recommendations for how to add a little more text. John, thank you for adding the text that you did, because I think that helps introduce each section really well.
I like the framework.
Yeah, and I was thinking too that when we see the final product, it would be great if the different pairing sections are separate sections. Right now we're just sort of doing a running document, but I think when it gets sort of cleaned up and add some images and finalize it and format it and make it look really good, John. The way, for example, as your old Saybrook examples
Sure.
were done.
Yeah, we'll make it fancy.
And make it, just make it read really well, because now it's a little chopped up, but I think we can manage that.
And then again, what?
The other-
Go ahead, Carol.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to ask for other comments and input, feedback.
And I just also want to note that again, that this is sort of the meat of the plan. There's a couple of elements that will still be added, even aside from the prettying it up and formatting it and presenting it. This introduction section, there are going to be a number of things. We're going to talk a little bit about the existing conditions. We're going to throw a bunch of maps in, particularly for natural environment, open space, natural resource factors, and that sort of thing, as well as sort of a survey of current efforts and organizations that are sort of working on this. But that's sort of objective and status, an overview of the status, and not really, we want to sort of focus on the identification of goals and policies. So that'll get filled in. And then the other thing that will be added towards the end of our process is that each action will be further broken down into an implementation table in which we will, assign, the primary entity in charge, supporting entities, priorities and potential time horizons for each of those things. So those things will get blown out a little bit, so the implementation of the plan can be a little bit better tracked. But so those things will come a little bit later. And so obviously today, we kind of wanted to focus on the text and substance of the goals and policies.
So let me ask a dumb question, if I may. Are actions A1 through A4 definitive, meaning are they definitely going to be done? Or are they more of a proposed action or a tenet or a goal?
I think they are, this is sort of the to-do list for the plan, to get at the overall policy, to implement the policy of, focusing on our understanding and sharing knowledge of the natural environment. If we're establishing that as a goal or a policy, these are the things that we should do in order to reach that. So it's a to-do list. It's not binding, but it should be written so it's at least somewhat achievable.
So maybe it's a proposed action?
Sure, but it is a proposed action. But once the plan is adopted, it is it is something that the town is pledging to do.
Okay.
So-
The other thing, when reading through it, is there any way to identify, like say for vitality and connectivity, what state mandate or requirement we're addressing or attempting to satisfy with that particular item?
Do you mean broadly by the ideas of vitality and connectivity, or
Yeah,
within?
but as we go through each one, are we specifically addressing or satisfying a particular state mandate? If we're not, it's okay. I just want, are we?
Yeah. Well, the state, and I could bring that up. Steve, I believe that was in the our original intro section, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
There is a recitation of the 6 state growth management principles. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah. Well,
Which the plan should reflect, and there is also in the state requirement 8-23, which mandates the creation of an affordable housing plan, does state that there are a number of things that the plan ought to do. I think it might be a little complicated in each section or each policy to trace it back to a state goal or a state
I'm just
mandate.
thinking in the broadest sense by each broad category.
Yeah.
So if you have vitality and connectivity and policy A, this is intended to satisfy or address state mandate XYZ.
So
That's interesting.
can't talk. Okay, talk to you. Bye.
That's interesting. Steve,
Michael, why
Aaron-
is that a good idea to do? I'll ask I'll play devil's advocate. Why do we care? Why is that a good thing to do?
Isn't that one of the reasons why we're doing it to begin with?
so I guess how in the past, and I think some of those have been achieved just through, a few paragraphs within the document of addressing, or putting a nod towards the requirements of that. I don't know that we've had a document, and John, maybe in your previous experience, do you itemize how you're meeting all of these in a plan?
There's usually a nod in the beginning
Yeah.
or in the end. So in the beginning of the plan, we cite, and I put this up on the screen, this is in our current working draft, that we talk about the statutory basis that requires, and we do have to consider all of these elements, and that's a lot, housing, health, recreation, social services, utilities, and that sort of thing. And then later there's also 6, as I said, growth management principles that have been basically in the last 5 or 6 state plans of conservation and development, basically unchanged. And I do think that, perhaps towards the end of our plan, once we've kind of laid out all of the goals and actions, we could put in, some sort of capstone summation of how we believe our plan, is in harmony or reflects some of the growth management principles and goals of the statutes. I do think it might be a little bit complicated to try to break that down sort of goal by goal. But I think it is an important thing that we do need to reflect at some level in the plan.
Oh, that's my only point.
Okay. So, but yeah, I think that's an important reminder, and we shouldn't, even though the state has unfortunately an incredibly broad deference to local plans, even over the state plan, unfortunately, we should still not lose track of the fact that the state has some specific things that it's asking us to address. So that's valuable.
Is there ever such a thing as the state coming in and auditing this kind of a thing, or they don't bother?
No. Really, it only comes up if you're looking for grants, state money, for a particular infrastructure project, open space project, anytime you're asking for a big chunk of money from the state,
I see.
they
I
will
see.
ask you, is this thing you're applying for, this open space, is it in your local plan of conservation and development? And does it reflect the goals of the state plan of conservation and development? It
I
does
see.
ask both. However, so for instance, and I'll give you a very specific example, in the little town of Voluntown on the Rhode Island line, I'm working with them to try to establish a small community water system in the village center, which is a big infrastructure project for them. It's listed as sort of a rural area, which is what it is in the state plan, which may create problems because the state wouldn't necessarily want to run a big infrastructure project in a very rural area, according to their
Sure.
plan. However, if it's in the local plan, the state's recent history, and by recent I mean the last 25 years or so, they've shown great deference that if it's in the local plan, even if it's not properly reflected in the state plan, the state will cough up the money. But that may be changing. The statutes are sort of re-examining the state plan, but that's a long-winded answer of saying we should make clear that we're doing our best to harmonize both, but
Sure.
but the state's history has been deference to local plans.
My thinking on this was only that, wouldn't it be smart to try to make this easier for people that come after us to try to figure out what we were doing and what we were addressing after we've moved on to something else? And if somebody does want to get a grant, how do we trace back that we are doing it the way we supposedly say we are?
I think that's right.
The state has also been relatively tight-fisted with grants in any of this area toward Madison. The state's not been a big supporter of Madison for decades. I'm not sure we're going to get, significant number. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with this plan in any way, shape, or form, but looking to the state for state money, particularly for this, it's been a pretty dry hole for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. And it's been a shrinking hole a shrinking fund for over 50 years. I'm not saying we shouldn't look at the state, but I tend to agree that this is not part of this issue.
I think those faucets have turned on over the last couple of years. We've been very successful in some state bonding, as well as
Some point, but it's changed, but it's still, you look at the pilot program, and it's almost gone, and you look at some of the programs that have gone on in Madison and the state. It's not been a reasonably. It's more of a source of funds today, but still very, very minor compared to other towns, and it's just looking at this. Like the first one, A1, to conduct a natural resources inventory. Don't we have that? Isn't that done? Isn't that complete? Isn't it updated on a regular basis?
I don't think so.
Colleen, let me draw on your comment. We use two terms. One is natural environment, We also use natural resources, and they're not the same thing. So I think somewhere in this, I'm still not clear what's included. Like golf courses are not natural resources. There's nothing natural about them, right?
Right? I don't think we're talking about golf course.
I don't either. You know, it's undeveloped space, but it's not a natural resource or not a, you know, it's not an open space. It's
Although we
certainly
do we talk about recreational spaces.
Right.
Janet, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. Am I muted?
No, you're
Nope,
fine.
you're good. We can hear you.
Now you're muted.
Now you're muted.
Yeah, you weren't before.
Okay. So I mean, maybe no one feels like this except me, but in an effort for time, could we have John and Steve go through these things with us and then possibly save our questions or write notes? And instead of having a free-for-all during this, to me, that is not helpful, but maybe I'm the only one who feels like that.
Oh, I think it's a good idea.
Okay. Sure. I mean, I guess I can go through. I want to avoid just reading it to you. But yeah, so I don't know how can we. I guess we could go, section by section. So in policy A, focusing on understanding and sharing knowledge of the natural environment. Again, the idea here is we have to start with a high level of understanding of what our resources are in town, what their function is, and then do what we can to engage the public in getting them this information. And so we have a number of specific tasks about natural resources inventory, upgrading our GIS, and getting that information out to the public, and then do public engagement and public education about the natural resources and ramp up some of those sustainable CT or conservation efforts like Mad for Trees, Mad for Bees, No Mow May, and that sort of thing. So it's really about getting information easily to the public. So that's the first policy.
Yeah. Related to that policy, John, the action item, I think that was a concern of the Conservation Commission, was if you have an action item that says encourage, what does that look like as an actual action item? Should it be something more intentional, like expand the curriculum? Or I know we use expand in public engagement, but I think some of their questions, make them actual tangible progress that you can measure somehow. I don't know. Is that?
Yeah, and I will, like,
not all of them we want to be specific. You want to kind of leave things broad in some areas, but I don't know.
I think there's two things. One, I will acknowledge that these sort of somewhat vague positive words are a staple of plans of conservation and development. Consider, encourage, support, promote, champion. Like, those are all positive words, but exactly, how you're going to do that. We could do this in a couple of ways. And in this particular case, we could use a more active word. The other thing I just wanted to be cognizant of is that this is a plan, developed by and hopefully implemented primarily through the Planning and Zoning Commission. If there may be some sensitivity to stepping on toes if we go as far as a more specific action word, about to say add environmental education to the curriculum. Would the Board of Education have a problem with that? And maybe they wouldn't, and maybe that's a bold a bold step that you folks are interested in taking, and that's fine. I'll but I just wanted to be recognize sort of the place and context of this document. But you're right.
That makes sense.
They can be squishy words. They absolutely can.
John and Aaron, I have a question related to what you just said, which was if this is supposed to be implemented through the P&Z Commission, I don't understand actions 3 and 4 and how we would do that and how we put together and talk about how the land is used essentially. How we go, I don't see that as our edict or our mandate or remit to encourage environmental education. That's not what we're, unless I'm learning still, but I don't know how that falls to us.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of this has, will need to take place in partnership, and part of the goal of this plan is to develop that buy-in from other, public and private entities. There's a number of things here that planning and zoning couldn't do that may need to be done by the land trust, for instance, or the wetlands commission. And so that's kind of the tension, that this is, a creature of planning and development, of planning and zoning, but meant to provide a vision that is implemented by all the stakeholders in the town at various levels. And so, but it's primarily a creature and a creation of this commission. So that's the tension. I don't know, Steve, you
Is there?
Yeah, can I just build off that quick, Bob?
Sure.
Hopefully it'll clarify. I think the plan is at the end of this plan to create a summary addendum or implementation plan, whatever you want to call it, that takes all of these action items and can organize and categorize them in a couple of different ways. One way which I see it done sometimes is to break out the action items from the various section of the plans and into who they are assigned to. So you might assign a number of them to the Wetlands Commission, a number of them to the Conservation Commission, Planning and Zoning, so be it. And then maybe establish a baseline or kind of a guide to have an ad hoc committee or an implementation committee who might be made up of commission members from various commissions or from staff from different parts of the town, who can then work independently with their own bodies to try and implement sections of the plan as well. There's different ways to go about it, but it would not, planning and zoning wouldn't bear the burden of trying to implement the entirety of the plan.
So is
The
there
town's done that before, actually, with the implementation committee. I think that was part of the 2000 update, and they were fairly successful, I think, in accomplishing a lot of their tasks, as they were that group that would kind of get on your case when everybody else got distracted with other things and said, oh, hey, don't forget about this. This is our, this is what we need to be doing. So that's,
And I think, Aaron, the 2013 recommended some kind of planning committee that was never established. So, I think that's important. And yeah, Steve, I think your explanation is great to say that it's the implementation part. And also to assign each task to one group, not to 3 different groups who may all think the other group is doing something.
I think a lot there's responsibility of staff, and in my position as well as the general staff who supports most of these land use related commissions to stay on goal. It's just like any other plan, if you don't do anything and it just sits
I
on
get that, but I guess I'm struggling with what the POCD is supposed to be. I thought it was a strategic plan for the land use in the town, the property, the stuff like that in the town, the physical things. The 3 and 4 have nothing to do with that. One is how we educate our children, which I'm not sure belongs in a POCD. We can all advocate for it, but if that's the case, then every commission in town should have something about educating children. And I'm not sure about public engagement efforts. I'm not sure how we would, mad for trees, I mad for bees, I don't know. I can see us saying we want to support pollinator programs and doing things like that, but this is getting people engaged with it. And I guess I'm struggling with understanding how this document is supposed to speak to that. I see how it could support it, but to say this is something we need to get everyone in town engaged with, it's never going to happen because I'm not, and I had other questions too about the practicality of what we're already looking at. We've got 35 actions and this is half the plan. So I guess that's the question is there is it's fairly esoteric, these things that we're asking to do. How do you measure engagement? We can do that, but that's a public relations activity.
I was thinking that A3 might evolve into something like a volunteer program for credit or something like that for certain students to
Isn't
do
that the school
something.
board's responsibility though?
It may be, but that's what I was
It has to
thinking.
be. So that's
Yeah.
what I'm struggling with. How do we do that? Why are we, and more questions, why are we doing that
Well,
in this document?
well, because I think again,
don't know.
if you're sort of drawing this back, you're pulling the lens back. We're focusing on the very specific action item, but you pull the lens back. We're doing this because, an understanding of the natural environment is critical to our stewardship of the natural environment, our preservation of the natural environment, and the sustainability of our green spaces and our beaches and our shorelines and wetlands to the continued future and success of Madison, which is a big picture goal of this plan. So if we're going to try to accomplish those big goals, we have to then go back down the telescope and narrow these things down to how are we going to get there? How are we going to get from where we are today to a state of a better approach to our natural resources? And inevitably, that is going to include a great number of things that are not under the specific zoning regulatory purview of planning and zoning. But you're doing this wearing your planning hat, not wearing your zoning hat, not
I
wearing your
get that. I get that. I get it. But
and so
this-
so establishing goals that someone else in town is going to have to be involved with making happen is perfectly fine. And
No.
it's
I guess I just have a fundamental disagreement with that. I don't see us establishing goals that we cannot enact. It's a wish. If I don't have the resources to make it happen, it's just a wish and it should go on a different list. We don't have that's part of is what can we do to make that happen other than to ask the Board of Education to put in place environmental education and stewardship for the grades 7 through 12. I guess that's where I'm stuck, right? So help me work through that.
there's this, that may be a tricky example for that, but I can tell you for things that are major municipal expenditures, capital expenditures, the plan of conservation and development has to be consulted on these things.
Right.
If the town is going to be building a new building, if it's going to be converting use of an old school to housing or what have you, the plan of conservation and development needs to be consulted. And the town, needs to make those investments and changes in harmony with the plan of conservation and development. So that's, perhaps the environmental education element doesn't fit under the capital investment category, but again, this is a document meant to guide the overall direction of the community.
But I know
that's a sort of a
you're-
philosophical. It's a big philosophical question that
Yeah,
this commission
you're-
will have to decide on how fine grain or how blinkered you want to make yourself.
But
But I
if-
think the other end of that would be all we're going to do is include recommendations specifically for zoning,
Well,
and you want to avoid that.
I'm kind of agreeing with Robert. I think that last statement, I don't think it's wrong for this plan to be the planning for the natural environment that is what planning and zoning should be taking on. I think these other issues, going after the education in our school system, going after the public environment, those I don't think are P&Z issues. And I'm not sure where they would help us in guiding us as P and Z, the P and Z Commission, and helping us make the decisions that we need. And I think my understanding of this would be that this is a environmental plan that we're saying we're going to implement as P and Z as we review and evaluate people's development programs. We're not trying to tell Madison what it needs to do. We're trying to tell what P and Z is trying to do. Oh, for the next 10 years, we should be this document should be reviewed in P and Z decisions, and we should keep these things in mind. And so in many of those, connected forest tracts, that's something we can look at. That's something we should evaluate when we're looking at a particular development. Are we invading the tidal markets? I tend to agree. I think it causes more confusion and probably conflict by trying to put in something that has to go to the Board of Education. That's their problem. They have to make a decision whether they want to or not to put in some kind of environmental education in their programs. That really, I don't think we should be taking that position. And the same way on 4, those are interesting programs that, again, as individuals, we certainly have no problem supporting them, but I'm not sure P and Z should be looking at those unless we're seeing a particular zoning issue, a particular proposal in front of us that says, hey, this guy's really going to have a negative impact. And this thing says we got to keep that. So I like A1 and A2, but I'm looking at A2, 3, and 4, and I'm saying, I don't understand why that's part of P and Z.
I can see how John could do something with what I'll call proposed action A3. I think if we were to change the wording to work with the Board of Education to establish a volunteer program for, I don't know, street adoption or cleanup or beautification of the town for credit for some students, they get 2 credits towards their graduation. If the school would agree to do something like that, that would benefit the town as a whole. I don't think that's a bad thing. And
I think
that
it's a great idea, but I don't think it's a P and Z issue. That's the
Robert, I'm
the
same thing.
ACA issue and a bunch
I
of
think
other
it's a great
issues, but it's
idea.
not ours.
And
I
do that
support
with
it.
the Boy Scouts and the Cub Scouts.
Yeah.
It doesn't belong in
I
P and
think-
Z.
To kind of take us back and understand that the commission, you are a combined commission, but you wear 2 hats, a regulatory zoning hat, and then this planning is you have to think a little broader. And in concepts, the town as a whole has encouraged conservation and protection of natural resources as part of our history here. It's in our, to further enforce that, it's in our revised charter documents that our town shall have a conservation commission, and by statute, this commission has responsibilities, one of which is to conduct a natural resources inventory. That's not by statute a regulatory item for the Planning and Zoning Commission, but the Conservation Commission is a supporting entity for planning and zoning, advisory, that you can refer applications to them regarding open space and other natural resource matters. And one of their other charges that they can do is environmental education, in which the town, and it currently and has been for several years, we have funding for students for internships through our Conservation Commission, those of which who have encouraged these No Mow May programs and other opportunities here. So there is a connection between these groups. We can't just look at this planning document on behalf of our community as what would impact, what you need to consider in making a decision on a regulatory application. So I do think it would be helpful to read through the existing plan that we have and kind of pull out some of those action items. Many of them are very broad. And so I do, and I know we kind of got off on this subject matter, and perhaps I started it by questioning the word encourage, so I apologize. But I do think that there is a place in for some broader goals, because it does give the even the town, when we're seeking funding or in applications, to be able to take some liberties and be able to show and explain how a particular project may fit under this broader umbrella. So I am not an advocate of steering to just all tangible. I think I was kind of referring or passing along comments from the Conservation Commission, because I think they're looking to have, I don't know, maybe more specific tasks for themselves. Maybe, they're looking at this through their lens as a commission, and perhaps the word encourage, they would love to see, yes, we'd like to do even more, whether it's through their ability or through talking to the school and opening up those lines of communication. So I think, I don't know. I don't want to get stuck in only and reducing a lot of these action items. These are results of meeting with the stakeholders in the community who are actively involved in our natural resource areas, whether it's through sports or land acquisition or conservation or a regulatory perspective from the inland wetlands. And so we don't have to put every goal in, but where we find consensus amongst these groups, those are the items that we want to highlight and put in, because this is not just the commission speaking their voice or me as planner speaking what I think should happen in the town. We're gathering this public input and trying to find common goals amongst our community.
Aaron, I think I like what you put up, in that I think it does a good job in separating tasks which are measurable, you can have a metric, versus wider goals. I don't know if I'd call those policies, but they're broader principles. I don't know if you want to go that way, but I think if we do, it's a useful.
This is from the
distinction.
2013 plan.
Yes.
And so I just wanted to put this up, and because, and obviously some of the language specificity is a little bit different in terms of, in our case, we were referencing school curriculum, but, there are educate and inform residents about protecting coastal resources is not night and day from what we're suggesting in our plan.
So that's a
couple of degrees more specific, I think.
Right.
That's a continuation of a policy. Which policy was it referring to? If I were looking at this the first time in 2013.
From 2000. So
Yeah,
these,
right. So which
these
policy back in 2013, yes, did it say we should? Is that referenced in the document anywhere?
In the current draft?
Yeah, I'm just curious.
No.
Okay, so then
we
what's the,
didn't make explicit reference to the 2013.
maybe that's what I'm getting to, and it's part of their conversations. It's, to me, then it's just meaningless. It's not actionable. There's nothing for me to grab onto. What policies am I supposed to continue? If it's not at least reference that there are policies which do this.
We don't say continue. The 2013 plan says continue.
Yeah, no, that's what I was asking for. In 2013, the policies they were referencing, do we get that detailed in the POCD, that if we were to say something
existing plan, or are you talking about the new
draft?
in the existing plan, there's a
plan
statement that says continue policies.
So I can't do
question
anything
is-
about the language of the 2013 plan.
What's that?
I can't do anything about the language of the.
I know.
Which
I'm
is,
trying to learn
It may be
what a
referencing the
POCD should
previous.
include.
So some
I
of
don't think those are policies. I think they're just broad goals.
well, they called them policies in the 2013 plan.
Okay,
And if
all right, good.
Unfortunately, I
Sure.
think.
these
All
are
right.
little table boxes, but there's narrative in the text that talks
Okay.
about.
Never mind. I'll look it up myself. I got the document.
Oh, okay.
I'll find, I don't want to
Yeah, and
take us
I'm
down
sorry
that
for
rabbit hole.
taking us, a little bit off track. I was just trying to
Yeah.
trying to illustrate that there is a long history of the plan of conservation and development taking on policies and proposed actions that are not strictly something that planning and zoning can do by themselves without anyone else, or that strictly influence the work of the plan of or of planning and zoning in reviewing applications or something like that. It is a broad set of goals and recommendations for the town writ large to move towards, and I think that's still valuable.
I also
Understood.
like, I would like to suggest that we keep these in and do the whole document in this kind of outline form at least. So we can compare how specific some of these recommendations are and whether they refer to actual land use or other groups in town and who would be responsible. And then maybe go back and think, okay, well, this really doesn't fit. Would that be okay with everyone?
I'd be good with that.
That's fine.
But it's good, Bob, to keep raising these questions because I think it helps us all understand better what our objectives are here.
I mean, and part of it too is I'm reading this as if I were someone who was going to read it and say, yes, I agree with it. And out of the gate, you've got two things, but you're going to stir up controversy.
Uh-huh.
And you may never get past them. People will polarize around those two issues. Without question.
I'm not sure I agree with that. Bob,
Trust-
that
Bob,
necessarily stirs up controversy. Many people may read that and say, wow, environmental education is a great thing in our changing climate, and
yeah, many people will.
put a nod to that. So I don't think that's not the intent of.
I know that's not the, yeah, that's it. Let's just keep going. We'll keep going.
So do you, and I guess Carol, maybe give us a little guidance here. Are you looking, would you like to walk through all of these policy, details and the tasks? Would you like to?
Yeah, I don't know. Janet had sort of asked us to go a little bit,
I think just
through
it,
it, but
that
I'd
may
be-
take us some
I'd
time.
also be happy, right? I'd be happy if everybody could have a chance to read it. And send any comments to Aaron or Aaron and me. Is that okay, Aaron?
Sure.
And Bob, your points are well taken and other people's points are also well taken. And I think this is how we work on it. We work through it, give it a chance to give it a read. I do think that
okay.
it's important to, have a more whole, complete document to go over so we can see how all the pieces fit together.
I get it. So in anticipation of reviewing it, it would be helpful if I could understand the extent to which some of these actions will be detailed in the plan, because that'll help drive my questions. So if you go to I'm just picking one around B3. Make municipally owned farmland and other unused arable lands available for active agriculture. Do we get into any level of detail on that? Or is it just like a standalone statement? Because it makes sense. But I can think of 5 questions immediately about doing that and the impact and the ramifications of it. And do those get thought out, or is that for a later date?
So some of that would be fleshed out in some of this, and I'm not, we could get into a fractal level of questions leading to questions leading to questions leading to questions. But what Steve had described earlier in terms of an implementation guide, some of these things that would be multi-step. So it's an action, making municipally owned farmland and other unused arable lands available, is a single action, but it obviously contains numerous potential steps within it, which would, include inventorying of municipally held properties, analysis of their capacity for agriculture, analysis of the immediate neighbor sensitivity for active
Oh.
agriculture and things like that, and then issues of leases, issues of bidding.
Right.
And so obviously each action contains multitudes.
All
And,
right, so, but they're
yeah.
all as of yet to be defined. Am I correct?
Yes, but I don't want to overpromise the level of detail that the implementation will go into.
Okay.
Like I just named 4 substeps of that action item. That probably won't necessarily make it all into the plan, but this would be assigned to probably Aaron as planning director and representative of Board of Selectmen that can sort of assess town holdings and look at some of those issues. And then you have good staff. You have Aaron. You have representatives in the Selectmen's office that can help make those things happen without making this 100% color by numbers.
Okay. And
And
then,
some of these, oh, go ahead, Bob.
no, okay, I'll wait.
Are you moving on past that one?
Yeah, I had a different question in general.
Oh, okay, can
Yeah,
I,
let me-
the
Yeah.
only thing I wanted to tie into that specific item, to me, when I read this and I look at
Mhm.
things differently than others as well, we all have our own, historic knowledge or whatnot, but I would see this and say, well, elsewhere in the plan, we have reference to having open space management plans. And so this could tie into that process. So some of these go together and while it seems to stand alone, we may be able to knock off some of those at the same time. When we create our natural resources inventory, now we're finding our farm, so
Yeah.
a lot of these may work together.
No, I agree. I've already looked at a couple. There's one associated basically with flooding. There's like 3 or 4 different actions that talk around flooding. And I'm not quite sure why. To me, that makes the plan more complex. Maybe there's an advantage for us to aggregate that into dealing with it. There is the increased standards on development, work with property owners in vulnerable areas, the work with inland wetlands. There's different things about that kind of topic that is sprinkled throughout. And to your point, it might make sense to pull them together and say, here's a general theme. But the question I had was budgetary and funding. Is that part of our consideration in these things when we're looking at these things?
I think implicitly, not explicitly, like we could say, drop a glass dome over the entirety of Madison to preserve it. That is infeasible for various reasons, budgetary being one of them. So certain things have budgetary implications like open space acquisition and things like that, but we haven't done, and we wouldn't intend to do a fiscal impact analysis of each recommendation. But
All right,
I think
so in fact, some of these,
focusing things on policies and changes to approach things like public education and policy changes, regulatory changes, that are within the realm of the possible within a standard municipal budget and staffing arrangement.
all right, but so in fact, then I'm going to conclude or at least infer that some of these of action C1 through C8 may actually never see the light of day. Is that not correct?
Well, that's unfortunately the reality of just about every
Okay.
plan ever written.
All right, so that's why I think they should be called proposed actions.
Well,
Let
they're
me Go
recommendations.
back to B3. We were supposed to go in order, I thought. Anyway, I just want to throw something out. Be careful with farmland and arable lands. There's a whole, Aaron, you probably know this, but there's a whole batch of lawsuits as to whether silviculture counts as farming. So
It's explicitly in the statute.
if the answer is yes, then B3 is saying we want to encourage cutting down open lands, cutting down the trees for logging. Anyway,
I,
you guys probably thought of
I
that,
go
but we
further.
need to be very careful.
I mean,
Well, that would be defined later on anyway.
and I also look at the developed sidewalk and trail connectivity plan. I mean, that is such a controversial area in this town. You know, and also three, I mean, first off, there's not a lot of municipal owned farmland and unused municipally owned farmland. I mean, the land that we have in this town that we own is used. It's not unused. And arable farmland, but again, I know what the word means, but there's no such thing as, and then turn it to agriculture. I look at that and I sit back and I say, you know, we're not an agricultural community. We don't have good agricultural land. And why is that even in there? I mean, I sit there and I say, the land that we own as a town has committees and organizations that are very much involved in maintaining and managing those properties and making sure that they're used the way the town wants to. I'm not sure I understand why we're saying, oh, jeepers, we want to make it available for agriculture. We're changing, in many cases, the goal and the objective of the land that we do own, most of which is recreational. It's not unused. I mean, we don't have any flatlands that are unused, other than we have some open spaces, but it's not, you know, and the land trust is very deeply involved. I mean, the beach and rec department is very much involved in maintaining and directing those things. Aaron, I'm not sure I understand how. I understand that we want to make this plan for the town. I see an awful lot of other organizations in the town that are deeply involved and deeply committed to doing these things, and I'm wondering why we're, as P&Z, putting in place the objectives and the goals when they're doing that. I mean, they maybe we wanted them to feed this thing, but I don't know why this group of people are, as planning and zoning. I mean, we're not in the beach and rec organizations, and they have a bunch of subsets that manages their properties, and they're deeply involved in those things, and they've laid out programs and plans of what they want to do with their property, that they're responsible for. The sidewalk and trail connectivity is a big organization, and gets it, you know, and understands all the issues of what it takes to put a sidewalk in this town, and also trail connectivity is not a trivial issue. It involves, you know, taking people's property away from them. It involves putting facilities in that are just not reasonably acceptable to the public. I mean, that sentence to me, all kinds of things came out on that one, and all kinds of objections.
But none of these have been defined to that level that would cause
We
an
don't
issue
have to
yet.
be there. All we have to be is right there. 8.4, develop a sidewalk and trail connectivity plan and identify the gaps between the key resources and destinations. There's a group in town that wants to build a trail from Madison to New Haven. There's a group that doesn't want to develop any further, not in front of my property. And by the way, I don't want eminent domain to take the front of my property to put that trail in front of my property so that strangers are going by my property using that trail.
Okay,
Sidewalk and trail connectivity plan, that's a very emotional, upsetting state, the same way where you've got the farmland. I mean, we actually ended up having to take one of our properties to public referendum because the upset state was so strong. And I can't see where we can put together and say, hey, we want to develop a plan for that. What we want to have the group that's in charge of that plan put their plan in place. They're doing that as best they can. I'm not sure. I don't understand why we're doing that and why it's in there.
okay, so no one's talking about eminent domain, and I think Charlie, you're referring to the Shoreline Greenway Trail. And the town has a bicycle and pedestrian committee, which is a town initiated committee formed by the Board of Selectmen, and one of their charges is, is to develop a sidewalk, bicycle, pedestrian plan. Whether some of that is in concert with the Shoreline Greenway Trail, these are things that, a lot of these are things that the town has already expressed an interest in doing, and a need for connectivity. The town has received state funding for sidewalk programs, for projects. We're actively exploring sidewalk access from downtown to the surf club. So these are things that, and perhaps, I mean, this is a broad statement, but this is really for accessibility. And these are some of the charges of the commission to consider these things: access and connection, and the sidewalk and infrastructure is part of that.
Well, what I don't understand is why we're doing that. I mean, there's committees involved in the town that are specifically responsible for those. They're in the depth of it. They know what's going on. We don't. We're not involved. They're not here tonight. It's screaming out. It comes off of this plan. I'm sitting there saying, why is that there in this plan? Why are we stepping on this plan when there are groups and organizations in the town working on that? It may be part of your bailiwick, Aaron, as a town planner, but there's no question they're terribly politically hot buttons. They're tremendously upset. There's a lot of people that are very upset about any of these things, and we as planning and zoning really are not in a position to take a position on this. I mean, it would that line item, as far as I can see, those things can be a full-time job to get through the planning of those things, developing them. I think the selectmen have the right and the authority to say, okay, we want a sidewalk and trail plan. There's a plan. I didn't understand that we're doing that. What I don't understand is, why is it in this commission?
So we've kind of explored this. We've discussed this, that it's not just the planning and zoning commission. If our current plan of conservation and development focuses on improving options for mobility and recreation, enhancing walking opportunities, identifying bicycle routes in town. These are not new concepts. These are some, as Bob had alluded, these continued policies that the town would like to move forward with. And I think,
what are we responsible?
You actually
Well, my understanding
is
is that we've been asked to put together a comprehensive plan for conservation and development, taking in input from everyone. Am I wrong on that, Carol?
No, that's right. And I actually wanted to add that I'd like to take a deep breath, and I would like to encourage people to even go back and look at the 2013 plan, and then also read the state and the regional plans of conservation and development, which we can share with everyone.
Yeah, that'd be good.
And that might help everyone understand what, what the scope of this plan is and what's our responsibility. Planning and zoning is the entity that is responsible for doing it, but it goes far beyond planning and zoning. And you can even see that in the list of topics that the state recommends that we cover, which John pulled up earlier in the meeting. So yeah, it's good to question. I understand why it's confusing. Why are we doing this if it's not really zoning regulations, or maybe not even planning? But I mean, even, protection, there's so many things here: communications, transportation, safety, that we're being asked to make recommendations for what can and can't be implemented, or what can we hope can be implemented. And again, circling back to the whole document and getting to the end where we'll see, implementation of a bike and pedestrian connectivity there's a committee that's doing that. So to answer your question, Charlie, I don't think it's wrong to have that in there, but is it a planning and zoning responsibility? No. And if it's a hot button, a politically hot topic, that will get worked out in its own way through town process, not through planning and
Correct.
zoning commission meetings, but
And that's, I guess
does
what I'm
that help
thinking
at
the
all?
question is we're not intensely knowledgeable on any of these issues. I question how we may know one or two of these issues in depth. But there's some significant issues there on each one of those line items. And we're saying that's the town plan to do this.
And we've had stakeholders tell us that this is what they, what they're.
I don't know what stakeholders I haven't heard from any of these committees that they're out there screaming at us to put this into the plan.
So Charlie, it's challenging because you were seated on the commission after some of this process had already initiated. So the commission has invited stakeholders who have specifically involved with natural resources. And that was a multi-meeting process and questionnaires that were given to them to encourage feedback so that we can develop these goals. The information that is on this draft for, policies or larger overarching goals and action items are things that came to the commission that were received by the commission. And so this is not a finished product either. There will be further public, there's opportunity for more public involvement for comments and feedback that the commission will consider prior to actually adopting a final document. But at this point, this is the these are the feedback that we've heard. That John and Steve had tried to, and Carol kind of structure under these themes that we're trying to weave through the plan. So I can send you a little bit of our previous information, I think, and our worksheets that we received that would probably help bring you up to speed a little bit, to at least see where some of this information came
That's
from.
fine. I mean, I don't want to be such a pain in the neck. It just trying to understand it better. Certainly would like to see that. I just.
Okay.
And I don't, I don't want to sort of contradict the concerns that this isn't your purview or your bailiwick. I mean, it is. It very, very much is, and it is incumbent upon this commission in the drafting of the plan to make statements pointing at the direction that the town should go in a lot of these areas that I put on the screen and that Carol referenced. Transportation, housing, health, safety, communications, government infrastructure, all of those areas, and the connectivity of our sidewalk network and a trail network has been a long established goal. And this is something that you very much, I think, will want to weigh in on in this plan, because there will come a time in the next 10 years where the town is going to be asked to spend money on buying land for open space, for a trail, to go after a grant for sidewalk extensions. And the question will be asked, what does the plan of conservation and development say about this? And if there's a consensus of this commission upon talking with the stakeholders and the public that nope, we prefer to keep our open spaces isolated and we don't want new sidewalk, that is a policy direction that you can choose. I do not think that is the policy direction that your stakeholders are asking you to choose, but that is your choice, and it really should be stated in this plan.
I have no
As an
question.
example.
There's always groups out there that want to do something. How big they are and how large they are, calling them, they're individuals who want to do a ton of things. There's also large groups of people who don't want to do a ton of things. You know, and I question, I question our background as a group that we have been able, at this point in time, I don't feel like I have done anywhere near enough homework to vote yes or no on those line items. I don't know what the ramifications are. I don't know what the unintended consequences of those are. I don't know what the upset state's going to be. I've been involved in a number of those issues, whether it's the agricultural issue, whether it's the connectivity issue. I know there's a tremendous amount of controversy and disagreement within our stakeholders. They are not all in agreement. There's huge stakeholders that say no way in blazes, and there's huge stakeholders that say, hey, I want this. And which side we come down on is wherever we, but again, I don't think, I have not gone through which side I want to come down on those line items. But I think each one of those line items have strong supporters, strong people that would like to do them. And I also know they have a lot of people that are against them.
But they haven't even been defined yet. They're not even defined to any degree yet.
The Greenway Trail has been going on for 25, 30 years in this town. It's very deeply developed. The agricultural lands in this town have been going on. It went on to the point where we had to take it to public vote. They have been going on. And those
No,
issues
not Action B4. Action B4 is just a general topic.
I understand that, but those issues have come up, those issues, and I look at that plan, and I'm just looking at this plan, I've read the thing completely. There's a number of line items in there that have been issues in front of this town for 30 years or more. And there have been various and sundry committees formed. There's been tremendous upset states with them. The minute they become public, the minute they get out into the public, and people understand what they're saying, I understand what we're doing here, and we're saying, okay, now we're going to say the plan is that we want to do all these things. And I'm looking at that, and I read that document that Aaron sent out this afternoon. And I can tell you, there's a lot of very, very controversial line items in there that are explosive. I've been through some of those explosions. They're not all love and soft and mirrors. They are they are real, and people understand what they are. They're not public right now because nobody cares at this point. And the question I have is, do we as planning and zoning, do we have enough as individuals, do we have enough background and information on these issues to vote one way or the other?
We won't know that till we define it further.
Well, it doesn't,
Charlie, maybe you could go back to watching some of the meetings where we did have stakeholders present and took their suggestions. I'm not sure what stakeholders you're referring to, but it might help you to see that, this is where this information is coming from. And then also I wanted to ask if maybe you'd be willing to take the document and write your comments on it, and share that with us, and and be a little bit more specific instead of just saying a lot of people are against this or a lot of people.
No, I just, that agricultural issue, that got to the point where this town took it to public referendum, and the public voted against what that is saying.
So maybe you could put in the information about when
10 years ago, but we actually got to the point where it was tremendous upset state in this town. This town came to tremendous blows, and it was a very close vote.
And when was that, Charlie?
It's down to where it is now, that it is a recreational facility now. It is not an agricultural facility. It is a recreational facility, but it's not low-cost housing. It's not baseball fields. Then the commission, when we have a commission running the Bower Farm, is what I'm talking about, running the Bower Farm, which is unused farmland and agricultural land, and that's gone through tremendous upset states in this town. It has never been a quiet issue of once the Bower brothers gave us that farm, how that property should be used and how it should not be used has been and that's, when you start saying that one line item there of unused agricultural land, that's the only piece of unused agricultural land that I can think of in the town. And that's been decided a dozen times. It's not a
One way
plan
to
anymore, it's
look at
done.
that, one way to look at Bower Park, Charlie, is to use that as an example of municipal land that is actively farmed. It's a community garden.
Oh,
So
it is.
that's
It's
actually
active and it's under an active
in the
committee.
CD.
Yep.
And so my rant, when I look at that and I'd say unused farmland, the only, it is a community farm, a piece of it is community farmland, a piece of it is open space, a piece of it is trails. To get to this point, it has been a extremely difficult process that took multiple years.
But so,
But that's not a reason to not consider anything. What you're saying is
I'm
anything
not
that's
saying it shouldn't be-
controversial
it shouldn't
should not be in
reconsidered.
this document.
No, it
And you
just.
You got to let it someone else.
Line item brings that up back up on the table.
I got it. You've talked a lot about it. My point is, you're bringing up things that you're saying that because they haven't been done in a long time, or they bring up a lot of controversy that we shouldn't even talk about it. And I disagree with that. I just say I'm not saying I'm a proponent of farmlands, but I would love to have the conversation and learn more about it before I can say something. I know nothing about it.
All I'm suggesting is that topic in this town has been beaten to death. We have committees in charge of those programs and committees in charge of those lands that are directly involved in it. And what I don't understand, and I still can't come to grips with, is why planning and zoning is bringing that topic back up again. It's been a topic that has been hammered. We have an active, aggressive committee that is working that property. They should be putting the plans in place for that property, not us. And maybe Aaron, maybe in the other.
And that would be,
I'll
that
go
would be
through-
part,
I'll go through
that would
those
be part
other-
of the implementation, would be talking about the proper entities to assume responsibility or continue the responsibility.
But it would be a continuing. I mean, they've been responsible. They've been active on that. And if they're not doing their job, I agree with you that we ought to be looking at them again. And we ought to be reviewing them. And Aaron, I'd be happy to review the work that was done. But I'm just sitting here saying now, I'm looking at that in the same way the Greenway trails, that's been hammered to death in this town. And the plan and the Greenway Trail people have hammered it hard, and they finally got the trail there at Hammonasset. It ends, I can't think of the name of the street right now, but but again, those are not quiet issues, and to put those back into the plan without, what we're saying is whatever whoever came before this commission, and I'd like to see that, and I'll be more than happy to do that. I need to understand that before I can, and I'm not saying I'm going to vote against it. Or that we shouldn't say, hey, we have this property. I don't want to convert this property. We will turn it over to that plan, and they're responsible for building the long range plan. I just don't think this commission has the background or the nature to do that. I'm sorry, I'm just being a pain in the neck.
Yeah.
Okay, and I would encourage you
You
again
are.
to put some of your comments in the document itself and educate us and share it. And I think if we could move on with other sections tonight, if that's okay,
Please.
that'd be great for us. Thanks. Didn't quite mean Beijing. Thanks, John.
All right, so we talked,
Correct.
do you want to go through B at this point?
I think we did some, unless. Yeah, I mean, and we've touched slightly on C also with some
With
Just-
some issues of flooding and
general
kind of-
flood comments. Mhm.
So that's, okay, so should we pick up from there? D refers basically to policies relative to sustainability, and again, to remind folks, sustainability is sort of the the triangle of concern for the environment, concern for social equity, and concern for economic growth, and how decisions, particularly as in this case, relate to the environment and the natural environment, interact with those three things. And so we looked at issues of wetland integrity and enforcement, participation, particularly in sustainable CT, which is a an overall group and implementation group in town seeking sustainability, providing resources to address invasive species, active management of trees on town properties in the right of way, and putting aside funds for management plans for open space properties. Again, these things are interactions with growth, environment, and social equity, particularly the sustainable CT focus. And I'll take people's
questions
exhaustion.
or
I'll take people's exhaustion for taking.
By the way, we can circle back to these. I mean, we're going through it for the first time tonight, but I hope everyone will spend some more time with it and write down your thoughts and either share them at the next meeting or whatever way is appropriate.
And then I'll receive your thoughts and I'll scream them into a pillow later. And
Yeah,
Go from
Carol,
there.
earlier you said to send comments to you and Aaron. Does that still hold?
Aaron,
Yes.
is that okay with you? Yeah.
Please.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, if you go through it, you can track your changes, comments on a document and send it to me. That would be helpful to do it that way. So I can follow what your thought process is here.
For E, we're looking at active stewardship of natural resources, which is again not just focusing on acquisition and preservation, but actual stewardship. So devoting portions of our open space funds, which tend to be a little bit sexier as a concept, is let's buy some open space, but actually devote some of these funds for active stewardship to make sure that these resources remain vital. Looking at getting rid of, and we talked about this in previous meetings, some of these small, tiny open space holdings that were part of like legacy subdivisions, sort of getting rid of those and letting people expand their backyards, but using the proceeds to go into open space funds to target higher priority acquisitions. Working closely with land trusts, particularly on their stewardship plans, and then education campaigns on the natural resources. So again, focusing on stewardship and not just the value of the acquisition itself.
John, a quick question or point regarding E2. I think you may have been on the meeting too, but didn't the land trust president say regarding number 2 that as good as that sounds, he's run into a dead end there for legal reasons?
Well, it depends. I mean, the land trust is in a different circumstance from the town. So I mean, the land trust might be bound by their charter or the nature of the easement that was given to them.
Right.
But very frequently the town is not necessarily under that same restriction. But in either case, it's worth exploring the issue. And if there are ways that to convert these small open space holdings, which really aren't functioning to any major either natural or municipal purpose, to divest and use those resources elsewhere.
So the distinction then is you're talking about town-owned properties.
Correct.
Okay.
And we could note that in here somewhere.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So, John, I have a comment and a question, and don't panic. It's a good one. The first one is, thanks for explaining the idea of the intangible goals, that they're appropriate. I'm still wrapping my head around that, but thank you for, and anyone else who spoke, the illustration as to why they're in there and how they might be implemented. I still struggle with the implementation part, but that's my problem. Okay, so I get they should be there. So then my question and comment would be, if we're gonna have them, should we go all in? There are 2. In all of the actions, there are only 2, I think, intangibles in there. And as I'm looking through this, I think there could be additional ones. if the idea is that education is part of the remit for the POCD, I'm just thinking as you went through this,
Mhm.
the open space management plan, I would presume most people in Madison don't know what that is, don't know we have one, don't know why it's important. And maybe there's an opportunity for us to insert in here the need for greater education, even on what the Planning and Zoning Commission does.
So
I
this is for
get
the
it.
general populace is what you're talking about.
Yeah. My wife has a habit now of telling people when we're at barbecues that I'm on this commission, and then I get peppered with questions, which is great. So far, I haven't gotten yelled at yet because I keep saying I'm new, nothing's my fault. But that only lasts for a couple of months.
No, we all
Um,
say that, actually.
Yeah, no. But the idea is that they don't really know what it is that we really do. And I think that there could be a role there if these intangible things are appropriate and expected, maybe that's part of how we can address it as well.
It's not a bad idea.
It's a great idea.
Sure. Thank you, Bob.
Wherever
All
we
right.
can.
Thank you. I know I'm trying at times, but I'm trying.
I understand I'm trying, but quick question. A lot of these little small plots that we have, developers were required to give those properties to the town free. And now you're saying we're going to be able to sell them? I would think that would end up a very long, I can't imagine people getting very upset, particularly developers, saying, hey, wait a minute, you took that land from me in order to give me approval to build my development. And now you're turning around and selling it to the landowners that I was not allowed to give to the town. I couldn't give them to the landowners at the time because the town said we had to have open space. And now we're turning around and saying, well, we'll renege on that and we'll sell them to the adjacent landowners, which I question, why would an adjacent landowner pay $1 for it? When he knows that I'm not sure we can even be allowed to sell that.
Well, that's the answer to a lot of that is it depends on the nature of the preservation and the basically the geography of it. And when we talked about this, and again, I guess this is maybe before you joined us, is that some historic subdivisions, and again, yeah, open space has been historically required as to be set aside with any subdivision. So if you picture a standard cul-de-sac subdivision, short stretch of road, bulb on the end, there tends to be very often sort of a ring of open space that sort of surrounds and buffers the houses from adjacent properties or adjacent land. That is called the open space for the subdivision, but it has no connectivity, no natural resources purpose. It's just extra land that was required to be set aside by the town. That functions essentially as a large backyard or a piece of woods in someone's backyard. And the only people it really benefits are those property owners that abut that sort of arbitrarily set aside open space. And now,
Right.
certainly, this isn't the case in
It's worse
every
than that, though,
subdivision in every
because
case.
All that would do is increase the tax. Nobody's allowed to build on that land.
Right,
Nobody's allowed to touch that land.
right.
But now if I have to buy it, if I pay for it, the taxpayer immediately is going to put a tax on that land and it's going to cost me more in taxes every year than I don't have a tax bill on that land.
Right.
But
So don't buy it.
And don't buy it. But if it's land you want to buy because you
I'm
want to put a
saying,
pool
why
in,
would you buy it? Why would you can't.
Because
build-
I
That's the choice of the property owner.
that's
Yeah,
their
they-
choice.
They
Right.
might not, but if they choose to, then it becomes taxable, and then there's some additional money in the town's open space fund.
Right, so they get the opportunity, the landowner, the property owner gets the opportunity to pay money to the town and then turn around and pay taxes on a piece of property that nobody can develop. And when we took that piece of property and set that piece of property aside, first of it probably belongs to the land trust now. But secondly, I just can't imagine anybody would want to even think about buying it because nobody can touch it. I can't do anything with
It
it.
does happen. It's a concept, it's something that happens in other municipalities often. And quite often adjacent property owners are interested in having that additional buffer.
And I mean, it's a similar concept to, when the water companies and those folks deregulated and there was surplus lands that weren't really doing much being made available. And a lot of that stuff is protected
But this
one
is
way or
very
another.
different. I mean, I bought neighboring land to
Mhm.
my property to keep it from being developed.
Okay.
Nobody can
Okay.
develop that open space forever. That's out of development world. In fact, all I can do is increase my square foot. Instead of only an acre of land, I now own an acre and a half of land or an acre and a quarter.
I
So
think that's
instead
the
of being
same
X number of
concept.
dollars in taxes, it's X plus something.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about, to give people that option.
But I can't
Under certain
imagine that there's a dollar it's absolutely beneficial if that land was developable. If it's a water company property up in North Madison and they're adjacent to me and the water company is going to sell it to somebody and whoever buys it's going to develop it, I may actually be the buyer of that as an adjacent property.
Charlie, but we're talking about a couple hundred square feet that was just put aside. It's not, you're not going to put the house on it. It's
No,
so I
know.
can
These are-
put a
that's why
park bench
people
in there.
can't put houses on it. You can't do anything with it. It's
It's not
open
big
space.
enough.
That's right. Land
But the
so
point
why
is
would I
this,
buy it?
it's, if we can sell 5 pieces and make
Why
$20,000,
would I buy one? Why would one of them?
I'm not
sell?
asking you to buy it. I'm
No,
asking
no, but I
someone
said,
else
well,
to buy
why
it.
would the landowner, the adjacent landowner buy it? There's.
Well,
I
you
know
did-
people
Didn't
wanna
you just
buy
do the same
There's
thing?
no
Isn't that what you
benefit
just
to that.
described?
Excuse me?
Didn't you just describe that you purchased a piece of land like that?
Yeah, but I bought a buildable lot. If somebody else bought it, I have a house jammed up against mine.
So,
A buildable lot.
Language
Oh my
is
God.
doing, I think I don't want to get into
I don't
another.
either, but I apologize.
I'm
but I
losing
just-
the point of this entirely, by the way.
The point
Yeah.
of this is creating an opportunity that could potentially generate funding towards a goal. It's an opportunity. It's not a requirement. It's not something that's being forced upon a property owner or in town. It's providing opportunities for other, for the town to relieve themselves of some liability and responsibilities of non-usable parcels, and utilize that funding if acquired for other more specific goals. So I think, Carol, if you're
I think
okay.
that clarifies,
I'd like to
yeah.
move on past this.
Yeah.
This is going to be a 3-hour meeting if we continue to deliberate each of these action items in this
So
fashion.
perhaps we'll move on just to the next one, which is the last one. And again, a stronger approach to property acquisition. And again, I mean, this sort of builds on the discussion we just had about being a little bit more strategic about targeting and identifying the best places to invest the town's money, or if we're looking at state money or private money, those sorts of things. And this has some very specific planning steps, which is, developing an open space plan, looking at specific properties for resource conservation, future community needs, building on existing investments, particularly Rockland Preserve. Obviously, a couple of months ago, we heard very strongly from those folks. And then being a little bit strategic in a couple of ways, like maintaining some funds in reserve for opportunistic acquisitions, because even if you hadn't targeted a site, if it pops up, it's on the market, and meets a bunch of criteria, you want to be able to move, as well as looking at some of those things like rights of first refusal to make sure that the town at least has an opportunity to weigh in on a potential acquisition before it hits the open market and that sort of thing, and then looking at partnerships.
Okay.
So this is probably some of the most specific and really the most fleshed out, I think, of some of our action steps.
Yep.
Thanks, John.
All right, all in favor? Obviously we will circulate this again and would ask people. Hopefully you're familiar with how track changes work in Microsoft Word, to get your feedback through Aaron, and we can incorporate this. And Madam Chair, as long as I'm speaking, if I could maybe set us up for the next couple of steps.
Yes, sure.
would be, so we're, so we've sort of fleshed out at least our initial set of policies and recommendations for the natural environment. I would suggest that maybe we move, starting next meeting, to some of the built environment discussions. And I'll be working with Aaron to prepare some of those worksheets to distribute to groups like the school board and the Economic Development Commission and Parks and Rec, and because the rec fields and things like that are part of the built environment. And the housing committee, these sorts of stakeholders to look at their goals, their recent wins, things that they're concerned about, things that they're hoping for. And then we will have sort of that open-ended stakeholder conversation like we did a couple of months ago with the natural environment.
Sounds great.
Okay.
Erin, do we have a list pulled together yet for built environment stakeholders? I don't know if we've done that.
I have some, an overall list. I'll categorize and share that with you. I can share it with all of you if anyone may think of others to add to the list.
Don't forget historic preservation.
Yes, and a lot of our list I used as a starting point, the working groups that were involved in the last POCD. So we do have a nice running list. Believe it or not, it included neighborhood associations as well. So this will be pretty broad, but we'll make sure that at least we reach out to them. Whether they attend is their choice, but hopefully by sending the and even some of the natural resource folks may have comments on the built environment as well and how that relates to their
Sure.
specialties. So we'll likely hear from both sides.
Great. Sounds good.
John, thank you. I know Steve had another obligation, but thank you to you both for.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks, John.
And happy June, by the way.
Happy
Not
June.
that we're up against a deadline or anything.
Okay.
And if I can just speak to that. I mean, we are technically the actual real world ramifications for running this process a couple of months late is nearly zero. We can certainly inform the OPM that we're in process of adopting this, and that will not weigh negatively on the town's ability to access any discretionary funds that may have otherwise been held up. This is not something that we need to race against the clock. We can take our time as long as we're making progress.
Great. We do want to be happy with it,
Mhm.
with the final product. All right. Thank you, John.
Thank you. Thanks, folks.
Thanks.
All right. On our agenda, we have a long list of upcoming public hearings. There'll be 3 at the next meeting. Did you want to say anything about them, Erin?
No, most of these are just a placeholder, so you know what's happening. John Dusa was able to table most of his work from the last meeting, Carol, since you weren't there to your next
Yeah.
meeting.
And by the way, John, I watched the meeting. You did a great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Masterful.
He did
Yes.
a good job. So yes, the 3 public hearings, 1, 2 site plan applications, and a few that will likely be tabled until July because they have other regulatory processes they need to complete before planning and zoning acts. So we'll just kind of skip down to the receipts. That is our next action item here. We do have, there's no action required for Opening Hill Road, but the commission, we did receive a 3-lot subdivision application that is tabled to the June 15th meeting. It's pending referral to the Inland Wetlands Agency, and they'll be acting, I assume they'll be acting next week on that. So you'll be able to hear that presentation and potentially act on June 15th. And Longshore Lane was also received. This is a coastal site plan application. However, it also includes inland wetlands, which is, so inland wetlands, just their regulatory process, they receive and can't act at their same meeting. And so they won't, the earliest the commission could act is their first meeting in July. So we have to push off any planning and zoning action until after that. So that's why that's a request to table that to June 20th. Excuse me, July 20th. So if that makes sense, we could just have a motion for both of those, the Opening Hill to table to June 15th and the Longshore to table to July 20th meeting.
Can we do it in one motion?
Sure.
Could I have a motion for both of those to table in future
So
meetings?
moved.
Thank you, Bob. A second.
A second.
Thank you, Janet. Any further discussion? All in favor that we table those to June 15th and July 20th? Aye. Thank you, everyone. Erin, I did want to ask, you know, we get emailed several emails with agendas, and one had the agenda package, which was almost 500 pages because it's
I
all of
know.
it's all of these applications.
491. I counted them.
So the way to do that, and I think I gave you I think I sent an instructional email on that. This is a new
System.
program on the website, Civic Clerk, and where we used to have documents stored on within the website server.
Application. Yeah.
The town is no longer going through that process. So the documents are actually stored in these agenda packets. So the way to view these that's most comfortable and most similar to the old way we used to do the documents is when you go to the agenda center, on the left side, there will be a meeting overview. And
Okay. Yeah, I saw that.
That's where you get it. Okay, I remember now. Yeah.
so you want to go, you always want to use the meeting overview as your base, because then you can click on the document you're looking for. Everything in the packet, so, but it's massive. So we don't print the
Right.
packet. That's where they live. But the easiest way to view this is through the overview. And so
Okay.
if I send you the link, it should open on the overview page. That's how I tried to set it up. If anybody's having trouble with that, let me know. But that's
No, I
unfortunate.
just thought I needed to go click on the other thing, so I went and clicked on it, and then there was 491 pages.
It is.
That's what I did too.
Yeah, and the first time we learned of the process, we panicked until we realized that we could at least view it online as the overview.
Yeah,
Because the public can't scroll through all those pages either to find the document you're looking for.
Right.
So always go to the overview. And we may just put
Yeah.
something on our webpage to kind of explain that. To the
Okay.
public.
Reminders
nice.
are,
Okay.
yep, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, next on the agenda is approval of minutes. John Duza.
Sure. So May 18th, 2023 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Members present were O'Connor, Reinhardt, Morgan, and Duza. Is there a motion for approval, please?
I'll approve.
Thank you, Michael. I
And I'll
second. Okay. Any comments, edits, or discussion? It all looked.
No, my apologies for missing that one. I had an emergency. It came up and I wasn't able to attend. So I apologize for that.
No problem. You missed a good one, though. The
No
notes-
doubt.
Just
Notes
saying.
look good. Notes look good to me. I don't have any,
Yeah.
any corrections. Vote to approve. All in favor?
All in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
I'm going to
Thank
abstain
you.
because I wasn't there, John.
Got it. Do we have to approve Tuesday, May 30th? I was not there. Members present were Snow, Peckinpah, Morgan, Reinhardt, and O'Connor.
So moved.
A second?
A
I'll
second.
second.
Okay. Any corrections or comments?
None.
Vote to approve. I will abstain since I wasn't there. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on to remarks. Circling back to the attendance template. We did want to make sure that everyone realizes as summer is here pretty much that we need to hear from everyone about attendance for meetings, so we can be sure that we have a quota now that it's kind of moving into high vacation season. So be sure to let us know. I think rather than, Erin, you've been saying if you're not coming, let us know, but maybe it would be great to just, if everyone could respond.
And you don't have
That's
to
a good-
reply all. You can
Yeah.
reply just to me.
Oh,
So
that's a good point. Okay, thank you.
blasting everyone with too many emails. And if you happen to know that you're traveling for, a month, if you're lucky, or a
Like
few
in
weeks
August.
to miss
Yeah.
the meeting, just shoot me an email and say, hey, I'm going to miss these, so that we just kind of keep a tab. So we know that and if there ever was a shortage, at least that way we could plan ahead and let the applicants know, rather than them having professionals attend and we can't open a meeting.
Right.
So that's all.
That's fair.
That's great. And then the question has come up again about any progress on in-person meetings, Erin.
That is in the hands of the selectman's office and the IT department to coordinate that setup in the room. There were challenges not that long ago, actually, for a public hearing for the floodplain ordinance and cannabis ordinance, where folks who attended remotely were unable to hear people in the room. So it was brought to the first select woman's attention, and I know she was actively following up on that and looking into some other not software, but Zoom capability that we have in another conference room in town campus. So
Right now, planning and zoning is the only commission that still is meeting only on Zoom, correct?
that's not true. The Inland Wetlands Agency, the Zoning Board of Appeals, they are all meeting remotely as well. And the Board of Selectmen, one of their meetings a month is all remote. It's their Monday evening that is a hybrid meeting. And I think we've, not to go through this again, but we've been in conversation with our land use attorneys, and there is a risk when we offer opportunities for folks to attend remotely and in person and cannot hear and actively participate, that could be a problem should an appeal be taken on an application. And so that is why the caution is there. I do not have ability to fund any technical improvements in town campuses conference rooms, but it is something that I know has been brought to the attention of the selectman's office, and they're eager to address this. And so I'm hopeful that that will happen over the next couple of months.
Okay, thanks. Anything else? Thank you
Not
all.
for me.
Thanks, Erin. Erin, I have a question for you after
Yes.
we close, so don't get off. I need some help.
Great,
Should
guys.
we go ahead and adjourn, and then you can ask your question?
Thank you.
I have a motion to adjourn.
Motion
adjourn.
Mike, thank you. Second, John Douza. Any
Second.
further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
We're adjourned.